master's degree from Xavier University and a doctorate in quantitative methods from Western Virginia University. Have no idea what that is, but it sounds very interesting. He studied global climate change for the last 22 years, and today he's going to be speaking about climate change. Come on up, Ted. Thank you.
I was about that big.
That was a long
That was a long time ago. I was about that big, and my grandfather took us to a big giant dinner in downtown Philadelphia. It was a huge ballroom and had all kinds of those lights which hang from the ceiling, chandeliers, and there were 1 million people there at least. It turned out that it was a major dinner for the Rotary Club, and my grandfather was president of the Philadelphia Rotary Club.
Wow.
So I learned two things. I learned he was the boss, and I learned that they made wheels. I'm going to turn on here's my picture. Says always something goes wrong whenever you do anything.
All that preparation.
All that preparation. Now that's the slideshow. Bang. And yet it's customizing them. That is so weird. Well, at any rate, there's the Rotary Club. And you have this thing called the four-way test, I see. And so I wanted to do a quick check about climate change. Climate change, is it the truth? And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Yes, it is. Is it fair to all concerned? And I would have to say, no, it's not fair. Some of us are considerably less impacted than others, and Delaware is particularly impacted. Now I need to drop down here to find how this thing run. And that is really weird. See, this is the opening right here, right there.
Yeah.
Slideshow. There it is. See? And I'm going to press. There.
There you go.
That time it worked. Okay. So, will it build goodwill? Well, if we fix it. It'll build goodwill and friendships. And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And yes, if we reduce our carbon footprint, it's going to be beneficial to all concerned. So, we're seeing we're passing the Rotary test here. I want to introduce to you a few friends, a few people I know. They can't be here today, but these are scientists who have studied this problem for all their lives. This is Kristen Pindell. She is a graduate of MIT, and she is one of the climate modelers. Her job is to take all the data, put it into computers, and try to figure out what's going to happen 10 years from now, what might happen 20 years from now, and so forth. And I've had some conversations with her about how she does it and how effective it is, and it's very interesting, and she works real hard at doing that. Daniel Leathers, he's somebody in Delaware. He is at the University of Delaware. He's a climatologist. He's spent his life studying climatology, and he is Delaware State climatologist, and so he knows all about how this works in the state of Delaware. He's a very interesting guy. David Titley, he's a fascinating guy. He is so much fun. You'd love to hear him. I wish he could come and talk. He's a climatologist at Penn State University, and he is retired. He was Rear Admiral of the U.S. Navy, and he was in charge of their oceanography program. And when I heard that, I was thinking this big giant building in Washington, D.C. with 100 scientists. He said, no, it's me and 2 assistants for the Navy, oceanography. And I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding. And that's how much emphasis they put on it. Michael Mann, this guy is famous. This guy is famous. He has created so much of a stink in the whole area because he's the one who worked up the famous hockey stick that created a whole lot of disorder, and people were angry and upset, and he backed off of making any public noise because he created so much a ruckus. But he's at Penn State, and he's also an expert in the field. And I just want you to know that all of those folks have a message for you here this morning. They want you to know something. They want you to know that it's real. It is real. The temperature's going up, and they want to know, unfortunately, we're doing it. It is us that's doing it. And it's because we're burning fossil fuels. If we had a couple of hours, I'd be happy to go through all of that, but we don't. So I'm going to have to skip over all the science. If anybody would like to know more about that, get in touch with me. I can spend hours and hours and hours on that subject. I've got so many slides, burn your brains out with them. What we do know is we need to do something about it, and I represent Citizens Climate Lobby. Now, when I see the word lobby, I have a problem immediately, because I think of K Street, and I think of the guys with money, barrels of money being hauled around and, you know, don't got no money. This is a lobby organization that lobbies only ideas. That's it. We talk, we gather information, we try to convince people that we need to do something about this. So it's that kind of a lobby. What can we do about this? We got to do something about it. There are local impacts, certainly. You're very familiar with that. Has anybody noticed any rain lately?
A little bit.
Rain lately? Any, you know, it's amazing how many people I talk to who say, I've never seen anything like this. And that's a common response. What's going on? And what's going on is, it is the effect of global climate change, and it's going to get worse. I came down here a couple of years ago, moved into the community, took some photographs. I took some photographs of some nice, beautiful dunes over at Bethany Beach, and what happened to them? They were washed away. This happens periodically. I took my dog for a walk over at Holt's Landing State Park, and by the time I was tired, discovered that the trail stopped and I have to turn around and go back. And it was because of being washed out. So we have problems. We get flooding, we have beach erosion, and it's gonna get worse. It's baked into the cake. It's gonna get worse. I'm going to show you this slide. This is the alarmist slide to take a little time to look at to understand what it says. This is a bar graph showing flood hazards, nuisance flooding, the kind of flooding that pops up when there's a storm, high tide, that sort of thing. Notice that they have the Northeast. This is New England area. This is us. We're in the Mid-Atlantic. Southeast. I'm surprised the Gulf Coast doesn't show up so much. Take a look at what this vertical axis says. It's counting floods, counting nuisance floods. And then you see we have three different colors. Current, today, in the year 2030, and in the year 2050. So we have today. Well, today, they're saying this past year or so, there have maybe been about 10, does that sound right? 10 nuisance floods over the last year or so. Does that sound about right? Of course, this is for the whole Northeast, but we're running up, that sort of thing happens. What happens, however, in the year 2030? They're saying we could be up to about 40 floods yearly in the year 2030. I don't have to worry about that. White hair excuses me from worrying about that, but I have to tell you this. I've got kids who are saying, you know what? This looks like a pretty good place to move to. And they're starting to think about it. And then there's grandkids coming down the pike, and they will be in the midst of this big time. Now, if you want to look ahead to 2050, by then my daisies will be a forest. There'll be a forest of me in flowers and everything. But the grandkids are going to be in the peak of their years, And the prediction is over 160 nuisance floods a year. That's a lot. That's a couple a week. That's out of control. That is really out of control. And that's what's baked into the cake. So we've got problems coming up and we need to deal with them. So what do we do? Well, there are two categories of doing. One is adaptation. Adaptation means you do something right now to deal with the fact that there's too much water. So what do? Well, you improve the system for flushing water away. What do? You raise the roads, get the roads higher, raise houses. Adaptation is what can we plan to do immediately? And then, of course, the big problem is how do you pay for it? I don't know how you're going to pay for it. It's expensive. Mitigation is the longer picture, the broader picture. In the long run, how can we reduce the burning of fossil fuels? What can we do with that? So there are these two general approaches that we have. Citizens Climate Lobby suggests we can do this. This is something that can be fixed. It'll take a long time, it'll take a lot of money, but we can do it. We do know how to solve it. If you want less of something, you make it more expensive. This is a basic conservative principle, actually. If you want less of something, make it more expensive. So what is it that we need to have less of? Well, let's take a look at free market principles. Here we have an entrepreneur. This entrepreneur has a lemonade stand, and let's see, she's charging 50 cents. I don't know where she got the 50 cents from, but actually it probably comes from free markets. Competition, we've got other entrepreneurs here, they've got their lemonade stands, and in order to be successful, you've got to know your costs. You've got to, in fact, you should have a business plan. What is your business plan? Well, you have to, let's see, you've got to buy lemons, you've got to buy sugar, you've got to have cups. But notice that there's something else that crops up here in this business plan that is free, and that's the water. I need water. What do? Well, you get your pitcher and you go to your mother's kitchen sink and you fill it up with water. But is the water free? It's not. Did the parents charge you for the water? Nah. This happens, we end up having free subsidized things that are involved in the business plan that don't even be taken account of. And in fact, carbon has that character. We burn carbon when we create electricity or heating for the house or whatever, and the planet doesn't get to charge for that. The planet, Earth, seems to be providing that for free. That is, the effect of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not taken into account in terms of cost. It's not taken into account. So, Citizens Climate Lobby suggests that we need to add the actual cost of this CO2 in the atmosphere. We need to add it onto the business plan. Doesn't sound good, though. That sounds expensive. This is the basic idea. Wherever carbon is mined or pulled out of the ground with the drilling or whatever, put a fee on the extraction of that carbon right at the wellhead, right at the mine head. The cost to the earth needs to be attached to that carbon right away. But wait a minute, isn't that a tax? It sounds like a tax, doesn't it? We don't like taxes. Does anybody like taxes? Who wants higher taxes? Does anybody want higher taxes? Nobody ever responds to that. Nobody seems to be asking for higher taxes. So, Citizens Climate Lobby suggests instead, let's not make it a tax. Let's make it a fee, because what are we going to do? We're going to give the money back to the people. Don't let the government keep it. Why not? What's wrong with letting the government keep it? What the heck are they going to do with it? You're going to turn all that money over to the political people in Washington, D.C.? Is that a good idea? No, it is not a good idea. No, so the idea is really rather remarkable. What the idea is, and by the way, there might be some technicalities like border adjustments and so on. The idea is to put a fee on the carbon as it comes out of the ground, collect the money, and when you collect the money, and by the way, there are plenty of conservative, economic conservatives who agree with this and who promote it. And then return this money to us. We get it. Now, wait a minute, before we get out of hand here. What is the effect of doing this on the economy? What does it look like? How does this work in the economy? So, REMI was asked. Now, what is REMI? REMI is the Regional Economic Models Incorporated. It's a think tank. REMI is one of these big think tanks where governments and companies go and they pay for studies to be done. REMI was asked, let's suppose that you put a fee on carbon coming out of the ground. And then let's suppose you give it back to the people. Calculate this. What will happen? What will happen? What are the consequences of this? Well, let's take a look. REMI says that under carbon fee and dividend, you will see a reduction in the carbon going into the atmosphere. It will do that. It'll have that effect. In fact, in 20 years, half of that carbon dioxide will no longer be in the atmosphere. What happens if you, new jobs, they claim new jobs are going to be created. The money circulating through the system is going to create new jobs. In fact, quite a few of them. They're also discovering that there is a general gross domestic product growth that occurs over the years, which is good news. Lives are saved because the pollution, this a subsidiary effect of burning this material, is reduced. Well, this is all good news. This is good news. So the question that I have then is, wait a minute. Okay, that sounds good, but wait a minute. How much do I get? Me. Is this $1.98? Is this enough to buy a hamburger at Wendy's or something? No, big deal. That's not very interesting to me. I'm not interested in that. REMI, how much do I get? And this, the answer surprised me. $288 a month up front. $208. This is real money. This is real money coming to me from the Internal Revenue Service every month. Wow. In fact, as the time goes on, the fees go up, it can be as high as $400 a month coming into my pocket. Now, what do I do with it? Well, I could do, for one reason, one thing that I do with it is the fact that the cost of gasoline will go up because they're paying more for the oil. The cost of my home heating is going to go up because maybe the natural gas or however I heat my home, electricity will go up. So I can take that money and I can offset the increasing cost to me for doing this. Maybe there's some money left over. Maybe I can start putting rooftop solar cells on my roof. Maybe Or I could go and buy a boat. I can do anything I want. The idea is individuals will probably make a better decision than the government. That, I think, is likely. I'd rather people decide than the government decide. So this is the general idea. So who is Citizens Climate Lobby? This is this organization that I'm a member of. And speaking of that slide, I'm going to slip right through here because Citizens Climate Lobby would like to know who's here today. If you're willing to say who you are, this is not a request for, you're not going to get asked to send money or donate, you're not going to be asked anything. This is just an opportunity to have access to their website. They'd like to say, here we are, we're this, are you interested? And if you were to put identification on that, then you'll hear from them, and that's all. This organization is very easy. In fact, it doesn't cost me anything to join, there are no dues. We're just here to try to develop political will. It's an international organization, it's nonpartisan, we cross party lines. We're not interested in getting into political fights. We want to try to bring some sort of closure to this problem that we have. It's a nonprofit organization. We have an idea for a solution to this climate problem, and we are building political will. What does that mean? Well, it just means that what we want to do is generate educational information among the public, among the voters. We simply want to meet with our representatives in Congress, talk to them, offer information about the nature of climate change and the problems that we're having with climate change. We like to produce letters to the editor. We put on programs like this one. See, this is called outreach. You can imagine that I'm standing there. This is outreach. I'm outreaching to you. And through all of this, we have chapters. Chapters are generally aimed at congressional boundaries. So, for example, here in Delaware, it's pretty simple. We have 2 senators, we have 1 representative, and so all we really need is a chapter, but we have several. We've got 1 in Wilmington, we have 1 down here in lower Delaware. And then the question then goes further, what can you do? Are you interested in anything to do with the threat of increased flooding? Is there anything you can do? Talk to your representatives. There is a form in the back table if you're interested. That form is a direct link to your congressman, to your senators. If you have anything you would like to say, write it down, and the organization sends it gives it right to them. You can encourage other people to be interested and to be involved. You can exercise your own personal power to reduce your own carbon footprint. Those are things that you can do. Join the organization. We have all these volunteers. I'd like to point out, just about at the end here, Delaware is ahead of the game. Delaware is ahead of the game. We are already a member of this thing called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, one of the few states in the whole country that does this. It's a cap and trade program. We're with New England, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont. So we're ahead of the game. We're doing things that other states aren't doing. And finally, we have the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan that I'm sure have heard about. Right now, the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan is looking for input from everybody. This is a website where you go on, you log in, and you offer your opinions. I have to tell you that I'm disappointed that the Sussex County Comprehensive Plan doesn't seem to be doing much with climate change. They don't seem to think it's something that they need to worry much about. And I think that's a big mistake, because this plan looks ahead over the next 45 years. And over that time, the flooding is baked in the cake. So I would recommend putting your voice in on the comprehensive plan. That's it.